we gather here together to celebrate in recognition of the God-given responsibility that teachers all around the world exercise in raising and nurturing humanity through education. And in a special way, I want to thank the President for being available for the education and sports sector whenever we have called on him, despite his busy schedule. Your unwavering commitment to selfless service of our homeland is truly inspiring, and we deeply appreciate your continued support for the teachers' fraternity. 30 years ago, on the 5th of October 1994, when the inaugural war, as is obvious to all of us, the current generation of teachers is neither the first nor the last we shall have as a country. There are those who have gone before you, whose voices from the ages past still ring as loud today. Those voices of the past teachers still ring as loud today because of the indelible mark they left on our lives when we were learners. They touched our parents or guardians, and we witnessed some teachers whose contribution has transcended the school community to touching an entire nation and nations. Therefore, in keeping with this year's World Teachers' Day, a theme that says valuing teachers' voices towards a new social contract for education, unquote, the voice of the teacher has immense influence that transcends the life of the learner and one's classroom environment. Such transcendency only happens when the teacher carries himself or herself with noble value he or she expects others to perceive him or her. A teacher's social contract is unlike that of many other professions. In fact, the unwritten expectations as part of the social contract of the teachers is what most in the community will use always to decide whether they should value this teacher's voice or not. One wonders why, in times past, the teacher who used to earn less compared with today's value of money was even less qualified in terms of academic qualifications, yet was held in high regard by society at the time. Part of the answer lies in the extent to which the teacher of old used to live to the expectations of the society in which one worked or lived, starting with school itself. As I said earlier, though the context within which the teacher conducts his or her calling has kept on evolving, the basic expectations society has of a teacher remains unchanged. Expectations like teacher presence before the learners, a role model in conduct or behavior, and the protector of one's learners are some of the virtues that we all hold dear to when we think of the exemplary teacher. Therefore, an area that the teachers' voices need to inquire further about has to do with what can the teacher do to regain and retain the high regard society has of this profession. And such introspection can only start with the current generation of teachers. As much as policymakers can do what is possible within their means to improve the outward form of teaching profession, there are issues of the heart of the teacher that only the teacher knows and can address. For example, when the teacher is not available to his or her learners, is fundamentally a heart issue. There are teachers who are absent from the school, and those who are present in the school but absent from the classroom. Yet they are being duly paid by their employer. Well, now, if you are absent, you know it yourself. And you also know that you are absent but still picking your pay at the end of the month. This is a heart issue that only the inner voice, the conscience of the teacher can correct. In the meantime, everyone around you, starting with your own family and the learners, know that you ought to be in the classroom teaching, but you are not there. To such people, the voice of the teacher will not have the same valuable influence, because a social contract, what is expected of the teacher, has been violated. And even when you stand before them to talk, they'll be asking questions, because they see a contradiction between what they expect their teacher to be in terms of conduct and what is before their own eyes. This is a day when we do not want to talk about mistakes or issues such as those I'm addressing. But I think it's only right and true to talk about these when we have an opportunity of a gathering like this of teachers and those who serve them. So please allow me to touch on these weaknesses that we have amongst our teachers. An area that the times we live in require the voice of the teacher is to become the role model of values and morals in society. Nowadays, there is a lot that is considered relative and subjective, and the young hearts and minds of our generation are the target of such forces. During school time, the learner spends 3/4 of his day in school, as you all know. This means that the adult interacting with this child most of the time, in the absence of the parent or the guardian, is that child's teacher. By implication, the child is looking up to the teacher as one would to a parent, because that's the parent that is present in that time. So if the learner is in school, the teacher's voice is the parent's voice that the learner has around. Therefore, part of the social contract that is precious in the sight of the Almighty God that has called you to this noble profession is that you become like a parent to the learners that have been entrusted to you. This kind of expectation that the learner and parent have of the teacher as part of the social contract will not be found written in your employment letter or the laws and regulations governing the teaching profession. But we know that the teachers of the old times, whose voices have transcended their active service in the profession, have achieved such acclaim because they role modeled parents to their learners. It is with this lens that society weighs the teacher they see today against the teacher they used to know. Therefore, it is within the power of the current generation of teachers to restore the high regard society had of the teacher as it ought to be. The unwritten social contract that society has with the teachers cannot be satisfied by mere policy interventions, such as improving teachers' welfare and compensation. The unwritten expectation society has of the teacher can only be fulfilled when the teacher responds to his or her inner voice of conscience that compels us to choose between right and wrong, good and evil, light and darkness. And as the government has demonstrated, the pay for its teachers shall be improved in a phased manner as resources become more available. And we all look forward to a time when all teachers are paid competitively in spite of what they studied and their level of qualifications. But we all have witnessed the fact that money or pay alone does not make someone make the right or correct choices in life at one's place of work. For example, it is a fact that teachers employed by government are paid better and regularly compared with their counterparts in the private sector. However, this better pay and regularity has not led to zero teacher absenteeism in public schools or institutions. On the other hand, the teacher in the private sector who is paid less and sometimes irregularly shows up diligently at his or her place of work. What compares this teacher who is paid less to show up more diligently for duty compared with the one who is paid better? That question everyone should answer in their hearts. I want to think, though, that it is not just about the vigilance or the supervision in the private sector, but the degree to which this teacher in the private school treasures the job they have. You see, what you treasure, you will commit yourself to. Of course, as the government, we shall do our part in formulating the necessary policies and enabling laws to have quality teaching and practice of the profession. In this regard, many of you are aware of the National Teacher Policy approved by the Cabinet in 2019, and subsequent to this policy is the National Teacher Bill 2024 that is now in Parliament for consideration before enactment into law. I encourage all teachers now to make their voices heard by contributing to the shaping of an enabling law that will regulate this noble profession of teaching. It is in your best interest to have safeguards in place for your profession to ensure that the right persons join it, that the profession is practiced in accordance with the expected standards, that those who go astray are also corrected appropriately, but also have provision to let go those who disregard what the profession really stands for. As I said earlier, the context in which the teaching profession is practiced has changed rapidly over the last 30 years. And there is enough evidence to show that this rate of change is not going to slow down any sooner. Therefore, as your voices air out your perspectives, I urge you to look to where we are and where we're going as a country. Do not get stuck in the past or present. You should ask yourself the question, what kind of country do I want to see? And what sort of teacher can help design that future we would like to see? Sometimes human nature holds us back from dreaming big because we only use the eyes of the past and present situation to judge what the future shall be. Our voices, and indeed that of teachers, have words, and words have creative power, for either good or bad. King Solomon wrote in the biblical book of Proverbs, chapter 18, verse 21, saying, in quotes, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit," unquote. Let teachers use their voices to bring positive, creative, and innovative energy into the teaching profession. But I must say that when you cannot envision the kind of country you want to see or your great grandchildren to live in, you may not rightly speak into the kind of teaching profession you desire to make the education system catalyze a transformation journey to that envisioned future for our homeland. Therefore, as teachers, let your voices be used to speak beyond gratification of the self or the present, but the future, and have the peace of mind and heart that perhaps you may not even be alive to enjoy the beautiful future you have helped create through your own voice. The beauty in the education system in those countries that we so admire, and some of you will do anything to live in such countries, were envisioned and were designed by the forefathers of those countries, who never got to enjoy the beautiful future they envisioned. But their offsprings and their descendants have brought to life that distant future their forefathers envisioned for their countries. And much as the teaching profession is a noble one, I want to remind you that the nation cannot be transformed by teachers alone. It takes more than one profession to transform a nation. Each profession, small or big, playing its part. This calls for humility and patience in the work teachers do and speak for. Such humility is exemplified in Apostle Paul's first letter to the church at Corinth in chapter 12, verses 14 to 22, where he says in quotes, "For in fact, the body is not one member, but many. If the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I'm not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I'm not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? If the whole were hearing, where would be the smelling? But now God has set the members, each one of them, in the body just as he pleased. And if they were all one member, where would the body be? But now indeed there are many members, yet one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. Nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. No, much rather, those members of the body which seems to be weaker are all necessary. I say this because there continues to be agitation about the delay in raising the pay for all teachers vis-a-vis some categories of public servants. Trust me, this government is committed to improve the welfare of all employees, but the resources constraint does not allow everyone to be brought on board at the same time. Certainly, when your turn comes for all teachers, it will be an amount that is meaningful as opposed to the agitation of that everyone should get a piece of the little that is available. If that were to be the case, the little that you would get would be meaningless to all of you, and then you would all be in the same situation that we are trying to lift out everyone, but one at a time. In conclusion, I have no doubt in my mind that the government is committed to fulfilling its part of the social contract with the teacher. Likewise, when each teacher resolves in their heart to listen to that inner voice, to fulfill one's part of the social contract for education, we shall witness a turnaround in the quality of our teaching and learning in this country. It is then, and only then, that the teacher's voice shall the kind that transcends the current times and seasons, the classroom and the school community, to touching the entire nation, to the glory of God. Now, I do not want to end without thanking God for making Ireland a blessing to Uganda. The successive Irish ambassadors to Uganda have all truly walked with us on this journey of uplifting the teaching profession. For example, since 2016, more than 200 Ugandan teachers who demonstrate outstanding performance have been taken to Ireland to benchmark practices in outstanding schools and institutions. And we do know that once these teachers have returned to Uganda, they have continued to excel in their job and place of work. Ambassador Kevin Corrigan and your predecessor, Ambassador William Carroll, thank you for being used of God to not only wish us well, but also support our teachers to have the opportunity to learn from their fellow professionals in Ireland. And I want you to convey our appreciation to the teachers who have been willing to come from Ireland, who came from Ireland many years ago and were willing to come to Uganda and work in our schools and institutions for a long time. Please know that we value and we honor your dedication and the sacrifices that were made. Once again, I extend my heartfelt thanks to all our esteemed guests and everyone who has joined us in celebrating this year's World Teachers' Day. It is now my singular honor and pleasure